sure you probably appreciate that we live in a world of duality. All of us are trapped in it. On one hand, you could say, well, that's just the way it is. On the other hand, it's not too difficult to realize that duality is a cause of suffering. Good, bad, beauty, ugliness, hard, soft, tasty, disgusting, harmonious, discordant. We naturally tend towards the things that are pleasing and try as far as possible to get away from the things that aren't pleasing. And because the world has no appreciation of our particular needs, then we find ourselves in situations that are displeasing for us and may even cause us to suffer. So I'm going to go through what is verse 2 in the Tao Te Ching, not all of it, just the bits that are relevant. Because, oddly enough, Spinoza and Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching have a very non-dualistic view on things. Now, to be non-dualistic is a very difficult thing because we're going against nature. Our conditioning is that we will always tend towards those things that help us survive. So tasty food is probably something that is going to be good for us. Not necessarily, because these days our food is messed about with so much, but in previous times tasty food probably had more nutritious value than disgusting food. You wouldn't pick up some disgusting piece of rotten meat infested with maggots, probably because you knew it would bring on some kind of illness. So the whole pleasant, unpleasant, and the whole duality thing, to some extent, is driven by our survival instinct. But it isn't wholly that. In fact, there are three parts to duality. We have duality in the body, tasty, disgusting, beautiful, ugly, through vision. Through sound we have harmonious, disharmonious, unharmonious, whatever word is used for that. And through touch, hot, cold, and so on and so forth. So the body has its own dualities that it lives with. The emotions have their own dualities, which are sad, happy, hateful, loving. And the mind has its dualities. God, not God, moral, immoral. So we live in this world of dualities no matter where we go, mind, body, and emotions. So let me get to what I said I was going to get to, which is the Tao Te Ching, verse 2. And it says, recognize beauty and ugliness is born. And it's kind of obvious that we're going to gravitate towards what we consider to be attractive and beautiful. So, for example, many people will see a muscular looking car, such as a Porsche, as being beautiful. It's muscular, the design of it is kind of muscular deliberately because it gives the impression of power. And for many reasons we aspire towards power. It's something to maintain our existence. If we're more powerful, we're more likely to exist. So Lao Tzu says, the minute you say something's the minute you say something's beautiful, then you've created a whole universe of things that are ugly and that you will try to avoid. Now Spinoza, oddly enough, says the same thing. In the appendix to part 1 of the Ethics, he says, if all things follow from a necessity of the absolutely perfect nature of God, why are there so many imperfections in nature? Such, for instance, as things corrupt to the point of putridity, loathsome deformity, confusion, evil, sin. But these reasons are, as I have said, easily confuted, for the perfection of things is to be reckoned only from their own nature and power. Things are not more or less perfect according as they delight or offend the human senses, or according as they are serviceable or repugnant to mankind. So what Spinoza is saying there is that there is no such thing as beauty and ugliness. Everything is perfect in its own way. We only create imperfection by comparing one thing with another. And so this comparing mind of ours, which is driven by this survival desire of ours, says, this is horrible. So, some poor deformed fetus that is born, stillborn, we will see as ugly because it's life-denying. Some beautiful little child that's just been born that is perfectly formed and healthy, we will see as beautiful because it's life-affirming. But as Spinoza points out, they're both actually beautiful in their own way. And in fact, there's a very good example of this, and I know I quote it a lot in these podcasts, but American Beauty. Ricky Fitz has a habit of videoing things that many people would see as either ugly or disgusting. There's a particular part where he's videoing the carcass of a dead, I think it's probably a dove or something, or a pigeon. And somebody says to him, why are you doing that? And he says, because it's beautiful. You have to have a very highly developed sense to be able to see beauty in what most of us would consider to be ugly. So that's the first part, or the first line within this verse in the Tao Te Ching. Recognize beauty and ugliness is born. And then we get to recognize good and evil is born. So again, good and evil are really just relative things. So if you have some infection and you go to the doctors for antibiotics, those antibiotics will be good for you, but definitely bad for the bacteria that are infecting your body. So are the antibiotics good or bad? Well, it depends who you're talking about and what you're talking about. For the human being, they're good. For the bacteria, they are bad. And well, I could digress here, and maybe I will a little bit. Human beings look at their lives and they see suffering in the world, and that suffering is real. It's not imaginary. But as Spinoza points out in another of his works, the infinite universe, and we don't know how big the universe is physically in reality. We keep adding more to it as we look further. The infinite universe and the infinity of mind. We hardly explore mind, but mind too is an infinite thing. And dimensions that we know nothing about. Well, I said I could get sidetracked here. But you should know that space and time are properties of your consciousness, not properties of what is really out there. You don't know what is really out there. So the whole world may be wholly different to how we perceive it. Anyway, to get back to the main point, good and evil are relative terms. And because we are a tiny, tiny part of a very large and unknown universe, what we perceive as evil at our level may be a good at another level. Yet we don't know. So we're caught up in these things, beauty and ugliness, good and evil. And then he goes on to say, is and isn't produce each other. Hard depends on easy. Long is tested by short. High is determined by low. After is followed by before. So this is how we live our lives, in this duality, pretty much all the time. Now, Spinoza was a kind of duality killer. If you read through his main works, or his main work, which is the Ethics, you'll find that he goes to great pains to eliminate duality from pretty much everything that he's writing about. So people have, say, an idea of God and creation as being two separate things if you postulate some kind of God. That's typically the Western view of God. God one day decided to create the world and he sits separate from it. And there are all kinds of issues that raises, but I'm not going to go into those. But Spinoza kills the whole thing by saying that actually God is nature, and nature is God. In one sense that demotes God and elevates nature. But he's actually saying that God is immanent. In other words, the nature of God, which is existence, is within the universe. Everything exists. We perceive our own existence and the existence of things. So God and nature are the same thing for Spinoza. There's no duality. People also talk about the head and the heart, following the head or following the heart. Well, for Spinoza, the emotions are in your body, and the mind can understand the emotions. In fact, a large part of the ethics is about understanding the emotions. And what happens is that the emotions and the body and the intellect become united through understanding. So there's no difference between body, emotion, and mind. They all become the same thing. An emotion is in the body, in the mind, and as an emotion within the body. And then we come to body and mind, which is a thing that sort of screwed over Descartes, who created this duality. Spinoza will have none of it. He says that body and mind are actually the same thing. Again, the later philosophers like Schopenhauer and Kant elaborated on that, and again I could get sidetracked, but I'm not going to do. But body and mind for Spinoza are just two sides of the same coin. You actually don't know what you are. Your perception of your body is wholly distorted through the senses. You don't know what your body is. And actually you don't know what your mind is, which actually means that you do not know what you are. But for Spinoza, body and mind are the same thing, just two sides of the same coin. And then we get to morals, morality, good and bad. Spinoza believes that morals can be based on a sort of secular view of the whole thing. We don't need divine intervention to tell us how morals should work. The universe is as it is. The strong tend to dominate the weak. Everything exercises its own natural power. So someone who's big and muscular is probably going to push around those who are small and puny. However, human beings have realized that a society based on those kinds of actions isn't going to go very far. And so we have laws, and we build societies and states, and while those laws and the state do not regulate everything, they do make sure that life is more or less tolerable, and the guy next door isn't going to come round and beat you over the head and steal your new 52-inch TV. So morals are a purely human concern for Spinoza. Now that sounds harsh and cold. There are higher views of the whole thing from Spinoza, but I haven't got time to go into that. And these things are essentially beyond the dualities of good and bad, moral and immoral, in fact, wholly above the dualities. And for Spinoza, there is no such thing as evil and good, other than what is good for you is what helps you in life, and what is bad for you is what hinders you in life. And beyond that, he has no definition of good and evil. It's purely a relative statement. So, someone who has very, very strong ideas of what is good and bad, or good and evil, is going to suffer, because there are many things that happen in the world that are, as far as we are concerned, most of us, that are repulsive, repugnant, and those things cause us to suffer. Understanding can actually demolish those dualities. It doesn't mean we don't feel for people who are in desperate situations or whatever, but the whole response to that is different. And again, I could get sidetracked, but I'm not going to do. So it is possible to rise above dualities to a large extent, not wholly. It would be an act of something like a Buddha or Jesus to rise above duality totally. But being immersed in dualities will cause you to suffer. Making effort to understand and rise above dualities will actually cause you to be happier.